This week on Talking Royals, no phones at the dinner table. That is Kate's golden rule for quality family time.
This is really important for the Princess of Wales.
George, Charlotte, Louis ain't got no phones.
Prince William gets very emotional during an interview with the widow about suicide prevention.
You okay?
I'm sorry, it's hard to ask you questions.
To see a prince crying.
It's so striking. I mean, I can't imagine the late Queen ever presenting herself like that.
Huge shift. And why did Henry VIII have an expanding suit of armour? Historian Alice Loxton is here to explain all. Hello and welcome to Talking Royals. I'm Lucrezia Millerini. Charlene is away this week and I'm joined as ever by Chris and Lizzie. Hi guys.
Welcome.
Hello,
welcome back. You've been here before in a different
I have.
set. We've had some soft chairs since you were last here.
Yeah,
And a new wig.
I love it. And also, Alice Loxton, we're very pleased to have you here. Historian, you study the monarchy hundreds of years ago into the past, and you're going to give us your insights into the old kings and queens, but of course, you're going to explain a little bit how the monarchy has changed over the years as well. So it's lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
As a reminder, the monarchy's been around for a few hundred years, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
a while. Yeah,
A while.
Listen, guys, what have you been up to, Chris and Lizzie, this week? Busy?
You're talking of monarchs, I went to see one yesterday. I went to see the King and Prince William at the National History Museum. We'll talk about that a bit later. Interestingly, of course, on a historical context, the last time we had a King and a Prince of Wales was way back in the time of George V, wasn't it? Because his son, the Edward VIII, who people don't like to talk about too much, was then Prince of Wales from the age of 16, wasn't he?
Yeah, we don't always have a Prince of Wales, of course. If there's a princess, as there was, of course, with the late Queen. But yeah, every few years, it's good to have one.
Yes, a King and a Prince of Wales. So we saw them in the Natural History Museum. It looked beautiful, all lit up, but we'll talk about why they were there later.
We certainly will. Listen, I want to say first of all as well, phones away, everyone.
Oh, yeah, no phones at the table. I was just actually going to be distracted and not talk to you, but...
Well, that's not just our rule, because we're usually told that every time we go into the studio, but this is coming direct from Kate now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a really interesting intervention from her. She co-authored an essay that was released this week about the way in which phones are basically ruining family lives. And we all know that Kate's got this huge focus on the early years from pregnancy through to the age 5, how that's so important in a human's development and can have impacts on the rest of your life. But she says there's an epidemic of distraction with mobile phones, and that's why they don't have any at the table. And we heard when Prince William spoke to Eugene Levy in that Apple TV series last week, we're very strict about that. No phones. So George, Charlotte, Louis ain't got no phones, and the dinner time is for talking about, as William said last week, things that trouble us.
Yeah, she talks about how we're regularly physically present but mentally absent because we're so distracted by mobile phones, tablets, computers, and it's not just children on mobile phones that she's talking about. She's talking about all of us. She's talking about adults being engaged on their mobile phones.
I just want to point out that Chris has just picked up his mobile phone right now.
Well,
I'm talking.
Was I not giving you my undivided attention?
Yes, you're not. But this is really important.
This is the epidemic of distraction.
This is really important for the Princess of Wales. It's all about bringing children up to develop social and emotional skills. And she talks about the quality of those relationships that people develop and why that kind of undivided attention is really important. 3 times in that essay, she mentions the dinner table and why, William said last week about, we spend time at the dinner table talking to each other, and she really promotes that.
Which is, it's a very valid point that she makes, but slight reality check. We don't all have the circumstances where we all sit around and have dinner together, do we, as families? That's an important point to make.
It's probably worth just saying that. I mean, again, like when William said to Eugene Levy last week, well, I don't do a 9 to 5 because I like to be able to pick the kids up from school and take them there. I mean, that does open them up to the criticism that, well, yes, you can do that with your job and you can fit things around the kids' schooling. Very important, of course, for all parents to be there for their kids. But the reality for many people is that they can't do that, of course. And sometimes when you're out for dinner, one of the only ways that people can get some peace is to give their kids a phone. But I think each for their own. But I think it's just important to realise how how modern day technology is becoming more and more, distracted.
It is distraction, but modern day technology is absolutely a necessity as well these days, isn't it? Because we can talk about not having our phones, and we should all spend, quite frankly, less time on them. But the royal families of the past, they never had to worry about these kind of things, did they?
Yeah, I mean, this is a completely new world for all of us, but particularly for the royal family, and it has completely shifted, I think, how we perceive them, and historians of the future will suddenly have millions of sources to deal with. If you think about all of the records of the royals, all of the videos that people might take when they're out on location, there is so much evidence that shows, pieces of evidence about their lives. So you can't, and if you compare that to previous kings and queens where there's only perhaps a few sources here and there. So it's a completely different game.
Yeah. And we've seen, the rise of social media and how, the royal family are embracing that. We see Kensington Palace, Buckingham Palace putting these very slick videos now out on social media and engaging with new audiences. But equally, they're going to have to look at, George, Charlotte and Louis, they're 12, 10 and 7. Where, as they get older, how do they navigate that with royal children? It's very difficult.
A lot of the times, because we always have cameras at most events that the royals go to, and that's a tradition that's gone back for many decades. But what is new, as Alice was just mentioning, was the amount of people that are recording their interactions with the royals. And sometimes you do hear things that you might not have heard otherwise. And there's lots of videos that people post afterwards. But also, I know that some of the royal principals find it a little bit distracting, because when you've got a phone there and you're talking to someone, of course, they can see you on their screen, but you're looking at the back of their phone, and it is actually sort of getting in the way of having any eye contact at all. So yes, pros and cons.
Which is what Kate's saying, isn't it? Even at the dinner table, but also it's so strange, that interaction in public, to not be able to just make eye contact because everyone's actually looking at you via the screen in your phone.
Yeah, she said that our brains are sort of scattered across dozens of apps, and that's so true, isn't it?
It's true, actually. I'm just thinking about all the ones that I'm sort out first thing in the morning.
You've just sent a couple of emails, haven't you, while we've been talking?
Yeah, I have actually. Yeah, I'm multitasking.
Her weekly shop as well. Yeah.
Let's talk about COP30, and this was William and Charles. This is really their passion project, isn't it? And they were at this event at the Natural History Museum.
Yeah, so COP30 is happening in Brazil, which is also where William's Earthshot is happening next month. That's happening in Rio and Belém. They might be in the same country, but you might as well be sort of, different ends of the earth, really. It's a long way between the two. But it has now been announced that William will attend COP30 on behalf of the King, so the King's not going. Another example, I think, of how the King can't go to every COP like he used to as Prince of Wales. He's having to step back a bit because monarch, he can't get involved in politics as much as he perhaps could do before. So William's going with him kind of makes environmental sense as well, because if he's there for Rio Earthshot, he might as well go to Belém for COP30.
This is a really big moment for Prince William. He attended COP when it was in Glasgow. We were both there, weren't we? We saw him there. But this is the first time William has attended a COP internationally. He's travelling, as Chris says, on behalf of the King. And, we hear a lot from people that work with Prince William about how he is becoming this global statesman and taking this role on the world stage and talking about issues like climate change on the world stage. And I think this is another good example of that. We'll hear him make a speech at COP in Belém as well. So I'm going with Prince William, so I will be bringing you everything from Brazil in a few weeks.
Did you already say this is the 5th Earthshot?
It is the 5th Earthshot. Yeah, it's the halfway point.
Yeah.
We've had, the first one was UK, then we had America, then we had Singapore, then we've had South Africa, and now Southern America. So everyone's hoping that next year might be in Australia and might be a reason for William and Kate to go to Australia. We spoke about this in last week's podcast as well. So it's time to move Earthshot to the other side of the world. And if they go, we might just
you guys get to go as well, isn't it? Good to speak. Alice, we talk about it being a passion project for both William and Charles, but they wouldn't be the first royals who had these so-called passion projects. Because tell me about George III.
Yeah, passion projects are nothing new. I mean, what springs to mind is George III, who was very passionate. He ruled from 1760 to 1820, so he was the great Georgian king. But he was very passionate about agriculture. It was this great age of improvement, so improving the land, basically, improving its usage. He loved turnip yields. If he was sitting here on the sofa, he'd tell you about turnips, I'm sure. And he was known as Farmer George. That was his nickname.
It's interesting because I'm always amazed by how much the King knows about very sort of unique niche subjects like turnip yields. I'm sure if you were to ask King Charles about them, he would know the current yield of turnips in the UK. But seeing them at the Natural History Museum as we did in itself was quite unusual to see both father and son at a same event, because obviously often, unless it's a state banquet, you don't often see them doing a joint event like this. And it shows that the King is able to sort of convene as many people together as possible, as he did at the Natural History Museum. The Environment Secretary Ed Miliband was there. There was a delegation from Brazil as well, and we saw the King and William getting out of father's car and then up the steps, and it was called COP30 Countdown, the event. They left separately though, so William left before his father. That's often the case because the King's often there chatting for a long time. But I think what Alice said about George III, we only ever really refer to him as the King who lost America, don't we? Or Mad King George, who had to step back from duties and hand over to the Prince Regent for so many years. But it's interesting to know that he was big on his turnip yields.
It is really a theme, though, that has kind of threaded through generations of the royal family. You look at the King, passing it on to Prince William. Before that, we had the Duke of Edinburgh. Environment is a real cause that they all care deeply about. And of course, looking at those pictures there, I was reminded of us being there in 2019 at the Natural History Museum.
What, you mean somebody was absent?
Where we had the King and both of his sons there. I mean, that's sort of, you can't imagine that happening today. There we go.
Same steps, different characters. Obviously Harry there, but not
how much has changed since
and that
then.
itself is a historic thing. I mean, when we think about George III and his son, the future George IV, I mean, he had a terrible relationship with him, and they could not have been more polar opposites.
Yes, and he spent all that money on Brighton Pavilion. I think then Queen Victoria had to sell so that she could extend Buckingham Palace. So you're always having to undo the work of previous monarchs. So.
Alice, let's talk to you a little bit now. You made your name, Making History, accessible, because we talked earlier about social media, mobile phones, and everyone's obsession, quite frankly.
Just don't watch it at the dinner table.
But don't watch it at the dinner table or here while we're chatting. But you're a pretty big deal on TikTok. So you've got 1.7 million followers on Instagram as well.
Yes.
Goodness me. Thank you for making time for us again. Thank you.
No.
Listen, you make history, royal history in particular, you're making it more accessible to a whole new audience, aren't you?
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. Who are your audience?
Oh, well, anyone who's interested in history. And the wonderful thing is, I love history, and that's why I love making the videos. But actually, there's people all around the world who are fascinated about history. I mean, I focus on British history, and of course, the Royals are such a big part of that. I was at Westminster Abbey recently filming, and Elizabeth I's tomb was there. And people are just fascinated by that. But we were at Windsor Castle a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, yes. Now, that's really significant because you, as an influencer, you were invited in there, which has never happened before.
I know. And this is the thing that I think it's quite significant, actually, in the royal family kind of image, because as you guys probably know, it's very difficult to film at Windsor Castle. It's very difficult for TV crews to make history documentaries there. But they invited a group of history influencers to come behind the scenes. You're normally, as a guest, you're not allowed to, visitors day to day are not allowed to film or take photos. Yeah. So we were invited and given free rein to film what we wanted.
That's a new departure, isn't it? And actually, we heard you giving a little lesson while you're in there.
This is the armour of King Henry VIII on display at the Lantern Lobby at Windsor Castle. The armour was made in the Royal Armouries at Greenwich, which were established by Henry VIII in 1517. This suit was made around 1540, around the time of Henry's marriage to Anne of Cleves, and it's thought to have been one of the last suits made for the king, who died 7 years later. But this is thrilling to see because it gives us a 3D vision of Henry VIII, a sense of his presence. Indeed, it is a rather imposing presence. The suit measures 132 centimetres around the waist and stands at a height of 6 foot. But here's the wonderful extra detail. The back plate of the armour has an extension of 5 centimetres either side to allow for the king's increasing girth.
Now, Alice, you weren't the only one to notice what did you call it? The king's increasing girth.
I don't know how to say it politely.
Because in that very same place, which is called the Lantern Lobby, isn't it? It actually famously is where the fire began, the famous Windsor Castle fire in 92. But standing there quite recently was Prince William and Eugene Levy, the Canadian actor who featured in last week's show. And they too were talking about the size of the armour and remarked on, I think, how he quite liked his food.
Yeah, a little bit, hence expanding waistline.
This is Henry VIII's armour, which I always think is quite amusing because he's not that big. He had a big historical presence and a big historical narrative around him, but actually not a particularly tall man, slightly round.
Wow.
Yeah.
He loved a good meal.
He loved a good meal. Exactly.
Yes? Chunk of venison, probably.
Expanding girth and loved a good meal. I mean,
Slightly round. It's been kind.
It is really interesting, though, isn't it? Allowing influences into Windsor Castle. I think we're seeing a really new approach in lots of different ways. We're seeing, the Eugene Levy chat on Apple TV. We've got King documentaries next year on Netflix and Amazon Prime. So they're trying to engage with new audiences. They're trying to open up the palaces as much as possible to members of the public. We've seen that at Balmoral. There have been these new private tours. We've seen that at Buckingham Palace, where they've opened up the East Wing, which is the room that opens up onto the balcony, the famous balcony at the front
isn't
of
there going to be
Buckingham
a
Palace.
Christmas shop there at Buckingham Palace for the first time this year
There
as
is
well?
at the Muse this year as
Yeah.
well. So they're really trying to think
Go
of
get your
different
Christmas
ways
goodies.
to
This is
engage.
expanding the brand, isn't it? And it's
Exactly.
going global. You look at all the platforms, the streaming
It's
platforms.
also, let's
that are on
remember,
there.
an income generator, because actually the Royal Collection Trust, which runs Buckingham Palace, the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh, but also Windsor Castle, their job is to get as much money in as they can. They not only look after the royal collection, but also any leftover coffers goes into the palace funds. So it's but this is this king's always said he wants to make things more accessible. So if you want some Christmas presents, then there's a place you might be able to go.
Yes,
quite
and
famous.
it was the Royal Collection Trust who reached out to the influencers rather than the royal family itself. But they are a representative, I suppose.
Yeah, let's talk about your book as well, because this is really interesting. Now, your book's called Eleanor, and it's about the lost queen.
Yes.
Tell us a bit more.
So this is my new book that's coming out. I'm very excited. I was just signing thousands of copies yesterday. And it's all about this Queen Eleanor of Castile, who most people probably don't know anything about. She's not really an A-list in terms of historical figures.
Do people sometimes get it confused with, was it Eleanor of Aquitaine?
Yeah, people
Right.
always get confused.
Right,
It's the other one.
The other Eleanor, right.
But what's so interesting is that she was, it's the great love story of the medieval age. Eleanor, and she was married to Edward I, Edward Longshanks, and they were very much in love. And so when she died suddenly, he was devastated, and he built this series of stone monuments called the Eleanor Crosses. These were really extravagant things to do in the 1290s, the final one being Charing Cross. And so my book is where I kind of trace this memorial. But it's fascinating because it's actually all about a king grieving, and raises all these questions about commemoration and memorial. And I, compare it and kind of think about similar memorials. I mean, the Eleanor Crosses inspired the Albert Memorial, a memory to Prince Albert, another royal consort. Yeah. We've also got the Princess Diana Memorial Walk, where people can walk between these plaques, these rose plaques around the London parks. And then, of course, we've had all these conversations about the late Queen and how do we commemorate her? Yeah. What kind of statue do we put together? So, yeah, it's this, as we said earlier, nothing is new. When we talk about the royals, this conversation has been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years.
We had a deep dive into what should we do for Queen Elizabeth, and there's a big sort of committee that's been set up about what do we do in St James's Park, and they've now chosen the winning design, and they've announced who's going to sculpt the statue. So yeah, it's a big deal, isn't it? But the way in which that Queen Eleanor was remembered by her husband, the King, kind of reminds you of how Queen Victoria wanted Prince Albert, her consort, to be remembered. And didn't she build some big things?
She did. And
in Hyde Park, for example.
It's so touching reading about, we think about these figures from the medieval age as these, you hardly ever see these kind of the human side of people because of the centuries of change. But there are some wonderful quotes from King Edward. In the weeks after she died, he writes, "Queen Eleanor, whom in life we dearly cherished and whom in death we cannot cease to love," which I think's wonderfully romantic. It is lovely, and it's interesting to see how people have interacted with these memorials to a lost queen over the centuries. Some of these stand in little villages. One of them's in Geddington Village, and it's the heart of this little village, and it's been there for 700 years. And, all of the history it's seen unfold. But then some of them, there's one in Northampton, but it's next to this enormous roundabout called the Queen Eleanor Interchange.
Oh, wow.
Wow. I didn't know that about Northampton.
So all kinds of kind of ways that she's remembered.
We talked about Edward's grief and loss there. And Lizzie, there was a really poignant video, actually, that Kensington Palace released for World Mental Health Day. Tell
Yes,
us more.
this is you see a conversation between Prince William and Rhiannon Mannings. Rhiannon devastatingly lost her 1-year-old son George in 2012 unexpectedly to a hidden illness, and then 5 days later her husband Paul walked out and took his own life. Yes. And this is a conversation between them about the impact of suicide, and also, about supporting those who are potentially at risk and those who are affected by it. And this is all, as you say, to mark World Mental Health Day. It is a really moving, emotional watch, and actually you see the Prince of Wales sort of fighting back the tears at one point. So should we have a look? Yeah.
If you could say something or wanted to say something to Paul, what would you have said?
There's only one thing I would ever say to him if I had time with him, and that would be, why didn't you speak to me? I think I ask myself that every single day. He was absolutely devastated. He did keep blaming himself that weekend, but I would just like to sit him down like this and just say, why didn't you come to me? Because he's missed out on just so much joy, and we would have been okay. And I think that's what the hardest thing is. We would have been okay. You okay?
I'm sorry, it's hard to ask you questions that I know.
Hard, and
it is.
You've experienced loss yourself.
It's okay.
Life can throw you these awful curveballs, but by talking about it, by, having hope, you can continue.
The best way to prevent suicide is to talk about it. Talk about it early, talk about it with your loved ones, those you trust, your friends. So thank you for talking about it.
And thank you for talking about it too.
Gosh, your heart goes out to Rhiannon there. And it was clearly really hard for William to hear that as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I remember doing an interview with Rhiannon a few years ago, about this very subject. And it is really hard to listen to what this poor woman and her family have been through. And also it's a reflection, I think, that Prince William himself, as he's described in his own words, he's been through the hardest year of his life in 2024 because of the cancer that his wife had. And as Rhiannon reflected with William there, He's experienced loss as a young boy when Princess Diana died. So yeah, and that's clearly, and they clearly allowed that to go out. I mean, they could have edited it out of that video. It was given to us by Kensington Palace. Yeah. So they clearly wanted to show, and that in itself is a change. Royals are allowed to show emotion.
That's what I wanted to say. To see a prince crying.
It's so striking. I mean, I can't imagine the late Queen ever presenting herself like that.
Huge shift.
And it seems so intimate being in someone's kitchen. It's totally behind the scenes.
Yep.
Yeah, you can't fail to be moved by that incredibly emotional interaction between them. And I think, obviously incredibly difficult for him to listen to that. They first met in 2017, so he has heard her story, but sitting there talking about it every time must just be incredibly difficult for her to tell it and him to listen to it.
So sweet is when she says to him, "Are you okay?"
I know. Yeah. We should just mention as well that the Royal Foundation have also launched this week the Foundation's Suicide Prevention Network. They have given £1 million to this, and they have brought together 20 organisations, including Rhiannon's charity that she set up after her husband passed away.
Really, really important point. And just to say, anyone watching, if you or anyone you know is affected by anything that we're talking about, there is help out there. There is a number on your screen now where you can get help if you need it. Lizzie, the issue of Harry and his security, we're going to talk about that again, and news of an alleged stalker.
Yeah, so this was a story in The Telegraph this week that during Prince Harry's recent visit to the UK, that high-profile visit earlier in September, an alleged stalker got near to Prince Harry on 2 occasions at 2 separate engagements. And therefore this has raised some questions again about the security that Prince Harry has when he is in the UK.
I mean, look, Harry famously lost the court case that he took against the Home Office. That was part of his discord with his father because, of course, it's His Majesty's government, isn't it? And he was taking His Majesty's ministers to court, effectively. But Harry wants this to be back in the public domain. I suppose we were struck, weren't we? When we were with Harry in Nottingham, for example, not a single member of Nottinghamshire Constabulary were there. Now, maybe they just thought, well, his threat level's 0 according to the official paper.
It's the son of the king.
He's the son of the king, and there are threats out there against him. Harry himself has said as much, but because he hasn't had it reviewed in such a long time, he's down there below lots of other people, and he wants this issue, even though he's lost the court case, he wants this issue to be back in the public domain. And in fact, there was a former counter-terrorism chief from the Metropolitan Police, Neil Basu, talking about it this week, saying, look, when I sat on this committee, it's called RAVEC, let's not go into why, but when I sat on this committee, the threats against Harry were very high. In fact, at one point, they were as high as the late Queen and the Prime Minister. I mean, how can you go from there to absolutely nothing and get 0 police protection? And it's effectively down to individual forces. When we saw Harry in London, the Metropolitan Police had sniffer dogs, weren't they? They were like sniffing around our bags and in the cupboards and things. Nottingham, nothing. British Transport Police, they put some on the train. So, I mean, why is there such a disconnect, and why can't the police have one layer of security for someone who is 5th in line to the throne and, as you rightly say, the son of the current monarch?
Yeah, Prince Harry's security at the moment, as it stands, is reviewed on a case-by-case basis. When he visits the UK, he is not automatically entitled to security anymore since he stepped back as a working member of the family, and that's where the problem lies. He has lost the court case, so he has decided to now pursue this sort of behind closed doors. He has written to the Home Secretary. It's something that he said he was going to do in an interview back earlier this year when he lost that court case. So it remains to be seen if that situation changes, but he has changed tact.
Yes, changed tack, so it hasn't gone away at all. Now, Lizzie, we've talked before about interesting gifts that have been given to the royals.
Yeah.
I think it was, what was the last one that was given to Camilla?
Camilla received a Barbie version of herself quite recently.
What was the cling film?
Yeah, there's a cling film holder.
Recently, yes, she was given a personalised cling film holder, which is
which
niche.
we all need.
As you do.
But this week we've got a new one. The King and the Queen received Lego figures of themselves at an engagement in Scotland. Would you like to take a look? There we go.
Oh, that's cute.
The cardigan.
That's a kilt, one imagines.
Kilt?
What we didn't know is the king has got very grey legs. So.
What do you think?
I think they look pretty smart. I think, does Camilla wear that kind of purple? I don't think I've seen her in that kind of outfit before. But.
So they were given these at an engagement in Ballater. Ballater is very close to Balmoral Castle. They were at a hall, the Albert Hall in Ballater, celebrating 150 years of that. And there was somebody had made a Lego scene of the hall, and included were those Lego figures.
I wonder where they'll keep them.
Yeah, well, they did take them home as souvenirs.
Next to the cling film holder, probably.
Exactly.
And the Barbie.
And the Barbie. They're getting a little collection of toys. I want to finish today by talking a little bit about, this is your second favourite subject, Chris, fashion.
What's his favourite?
Well, I would hope royals.
Right.
Fashion, yes.
After that, it's fashion.
Meghan went to Paris Fashion Week, wore a white dress.
Oh,
yes?
my goodness. Can we have the detail, please, Lizzie?
So, yes, you're all factually correct.
It was
she was at
correct.
the.
She wore a white dress in Paris.
She was at Paris Fashion Week at the Balenciaga show, supporting the newly installed creative director there, Pierpaolo Piccioli, who she has a long-standing friendship with. Her first time back at Paris Fashion Week in over a decade, but interestingly, her first time back in Europe since 2023.
I think the outfit was fantastic. What do you think?
Very chic. I mean, I couldn't pull it off. So respect to her for doing that.
Look at her.
I couldn't pull it off either. But
I mean, she looks like she's on the catwalk there a little bit.
Yeah.
Swooping through the revolving doors of a hotel and out on the red carpet like.
I mean, listen, there were some people, weren't there, online saying that actually there was a bit of a kind of link to Princess Leia. Star Wars fans
it's given me Princess Leia vibes,
You're
Chris.
right, okay,
it
fine.
really is. Yeah. Do you agree?
Probably weren't alive in the 1970s when Star Wars came out. However,
I
for
cannot
those of us
possibly
who were,
reveal that. I think she looks fab.
Yeah.
And also, you said this is the first time in Europe for 2 years.
Since
Technically,
yeah. I mean, there's always an interesting debate. How can Meghan come to Paris, but Harry wouldn't allow Meghan to come to London?
Yeah,
and,
there is
that's
that.
go back to the security thing we were just talking about. And apparently, the threats in London are that much greater than they are in Paris. And the fact that she went in and out and didn't post anything on Instagram until she was wheels up on the plane, and that was how she was to do it. But I mean, security's been an issue for monarchs over the years, isn't it? I mean, they're not. The monarchs are at threat, not just from external threats, but from actually sometimes those inside your own court.
Absolutely. I mean, there are assassination attempts on Victoria, on George, throughout history. And people have also always been obsessed with royals. I mean, you look back, even, I suppose the great age of celebrity was probably the Georgian age, that where it kind of burst or exploded, if you like, where figures like Duchess of Devonshire was around. But people have always been interested in wanting to get up close.
You can't walk around in Henry VIII's armour all the time. Earlier,
Well, it's helpful with his expanding waist.
Yes.
That's helpful to us all. Listen, it's been absolutely lovely to talk to all of you. Alice, thank you so much
Thank
for
you
coming.
so much,
to us.
Alice.
Such fun.
Best of luck with the book as well. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us and away from your almost 2 million followers on Instagram.
I mean, yes.
We've got some catching up to
We
do.
have.
Yeah, even if we put all of ours together, we'd still be falling a bit
Nowhere near it.
Nowhere
Near it. Listen, it's been lovely to talk.
Obviously not as interesting. That's the thing.
We'll work on it.
Yeah.
Chris, Lizzie, thank you as ever. That is it for now. And just to remind you, you can, of course, hear Talking Royals every week by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. But until the next time, bye-bye.